Recording is in progress. Good evening, everybody. It's January 23rd, 5:43. This is Delta Evening and Weekends class. First day of React. It's an exciting thing. We're finally going to get into a front-end framework. We're going to lead back in our JavaScript. And this is going to kind of give us the power and the tools we need to build some pretty cool websites. We've run up against the limitations of Django, I feel, in terms of like scalability and design. CSS has difficulty working with it. Jinja is only so powerful. We're going to be leaning on JavaScript, as you should, for interacting with the DOM and building out, stuff that will be. I don't want to talk about it that way. React builds a virtual DOM, so we're not interacting with the DOM directly. We're kind of building our own, but if that doesn't make any sense, just hold on. All right, so today, as we talked about, we didn't talk about this, but we're going to run through this real quick. I want to show you how objects work in JavaScript. It's not significantly different. What you kind of know does transfer over. It's different syntax. I don't like it as much. We're going to create a quick React application for the command line. We're going to understand the concepts of components and state, and this is very important. This is kind of the bread and butter of what React does. A lot of other tools do it similarly, but not exactly. This state changing, this use of hooks, use of custom hooks, and managing, building out a virtual DOM using a bunch of components that you can kind of plug and play with. That's what React is about. Some people like it more than popular tools such as Angular or Vuex. If you're using the whole framework, it's fine. It's good. It's as good as any of them, and it's a good one to pick up and run with. We'll just jump into this. JSX. When you see JSX, think Jinja. JSX is going to be the way we're going to template in, or sorry, not template in, but I guess template in is the word. We're going to be injecting JavaScript directly into our HTML. In the past, we would have JavaScript in a different spot within the scripting tag, within the script HTML tag. Here, we're going to be writing straight into the HTML and really kind of show you how much control we have over these things. But it's going to get a little wonky because there is. We'll get to it. So let's start with object-oriented JavaScript, or using classes in JavaScript. This is what it looks like. So we set a class. We're going to use person. Instead of init, we're going to do this constructor function. You pass it in, it's 2 arguments. And then here's our curly braces. We're back in it. You're going to use this. This is the same thing as self. So this dot and self dot work very similarly with some painful stuff with JavaScript. If you're using modern JavaScript and you're using fat arrow functions, it works exactly the way you expect it to. If you're not using fat arrow functions, which I'll explain real quick if y'all don't know what I'm talking about, sometimes this dot gets a little funky. So let's just paste this and watch this work. I'm going to create a file called class.js. Right there. So if we wanted to call this, we will need to console.log, of course. Here we have a function, say hello. We don't need to pass in, this is maybe a small thing. We don't need to pass in this every time. You normally would do self. We don't have to do that. Minor win for JavaScript. You can probably figure out what this is doing. It's pulling, or it's returning a string. This dot name, as you would expect, is this one. This one that's going to get passed in when you instantiate, and this dot hometown, same thing. Creating a constant of John, new person. You need to do this. This is a JavaScript thingy. Sorry, get used to it. Pass in positional arguments. John from New Jersey. Console.log it, and works as you kind of expected. John dot, so class dot, say hello, which is this function here, and we invoke it. And if everything works all right, Why did that go so slow? Okay, we good. There. Any questions about class? You'll see this later. We're not going to get too into it, but when I say fat arrow functions, in case anyone doesn't know, normally you're going to do something like, and we'll make a new one. Oh wait, we're in JavaScript again, aren't we? You do something like this. So that is one way to create functions. The other way, if I haven't completely made a fool of myself and forgotten how to do this without looking it up, you would do something like that, right? That is functionally the same thing. One difference you'll see in React is this. Oh, not hell world, goodness. This binds variables and functions within this function to this, and I think you we'll get into it, but I just want to talk about it. We will be seeing this used, and if you haven't seen this before, I forget if we covered this in JavaScript. That's functionally the same thing as this, I believe. Is there a mistake here? Oh, okay, yeah, that's Hello World 2 is fine. Okay, yeah, that's fine JavaScript. Not that JavaScript would blow up if there was a problem, but you know. Back to the curriculum. I covered all of these things. React, as we talked about a little bit, React is a front-end framework developed by Facebook. It's open source from 2013. It's been one of the most popular frameworks for a long time. Some people like heavier, some people like lighter, some people don't like components. So that's why you would use or see other frameworks. But we teach React, and React is pretty solid. It's pretty popular. You're not learning a niche framework here. npm, npx, kind of like our pip that we were using, or sorry, not pip, but kind of like invoking Python after you install Django. We're going to be directly interacting with React and creating React applications. So normally when you do Django, well, maybe not startup, but create, or Django, create project. Or is it create project? New project. What is that? I already forgot the invocation. We're creating the whole shebang here with npx. So npx, create React app, and then you're going to name the application. We're going to get a lot of stuff out of that, and we'll talk about it afterwards. This takes just a little bit. React app, my app. Talk about some things we're getting while we do that. The node modules folder, very similar to your virtual environment, but the virtual environment has to be sourced, right? Once this virtual environment is created, you have to activate it, and that tells Python to start putting things in there. JavaScript slaps a node modules wherever it needs it, and it references that one. If there's not one there, it goes and looks at its main install node modules. So it's kind of weird how some things get into one and not the other. Everything you're doing within a project will be installed within node modules. That needs to be added to your git ignore. We don't want to push these node modules up, but the package.json is going to be very similar to our requirements.txt, except it's auto-generated. So let's see what we got here. Oh, we're not getting node modules just yet. Hold on. Or is it in here? Oh, it is in here. That's right. I have a feeling I was going to paste higher. So no modules. We talked about that. Public folder is where most of our work's going to be kind of going on. No modules you can forget about. Don't worry. That is something that comes with JavaScript when you're running Node. Public, actually, we're not worrying too much about. Public is very much like a static, and there's more to it than that. I'll just read it. The public folder has a bunch of public-facing assets, like the favicon, top corner of your tab, which is your company's logo. Some things will go in the public folder that you want kind of front-facing, but maybe some pictures and whatnot. Overall, we're not going to be touching public very much. What we are going to be touching is source. And source has a lot of stuff in here as well. But don't worry too much about it because we're really only focused on, it's going to have us look at index.js, but really truly app.js is your single point of entry and everything's going to come into that. So when I did Flask, remember app.py was the single file, everything's run from here and everything else that you want to do can be brought in. That is what app.js is. App.js is where you're going to be writing your code or referencing other code, referencing other pages. Technically, index.js is the entry, but app.js is where you're actually going to be editing it. So looking within index.js, like I said, it is kind of the entry point into your application. It is loading in, and this is how you pull in a component. This is right now, there's no magic here. Importing app from app.js. This is JavaScript. Just like Python, we don't need to do .py afterwards or .js for JavaScript. This is importing that app.js, calling it app, and then it is just plugging it in. This looks like an HTML tag. What this actually is doing is anything that shows up on this page is when React is invoked, it's going to run that app. As we build on to app, you're going to start seeing components built in, kind of like this. And hold on to questions. Hang on. It's going to be explained better. It's a kind of new concept, and it looks a lot different, but it's not that hard. Looking at app.js, it doesn't really tell me to run this, but I kind of want to just show you npm run npm react run react. What is it? Is that right? I think that's the command. Yeah. React usually opens up a file for us. Or not a file, a web page. Just trying to do right now over here, which I should probably pull this way. Here's our application. In Django, when you start up a brand new Django application and don't give it anything, it's got some kind of base stuff. Well, so does React. And until we start writing over it, this is what we've got. But let's take a look. We've got an image. It's this logo brought in from probably public. Some HTML here, edit source app.js to reload. Really helpful, by the way. If you don't know anything about React, it tells you right off the bat, hey, you want to edit this? Edit app.js within source. And some other stuff. But all this looks like HTML, and you might be thinking, oh, there's the HTML, Jordan. What are you talking about, this virtual DOM? That's not HTML. It looks like HTML. We are building HTML out of JavaScript and then serving it to be constructed. So things are going to act a little strange and may not always one-for-one work. And you'll see that as we're building out our skills in React, you need to really be looking, at React when you're trying to work with this HTML. If you were to build a button in here and you wanted to figure out, oh, how do you do this in HTML, and you go look up how to make button do X thing in HTML, it's going to steer you astray because this is not technically HTML. There are slight differences. Overall, it looks very similar. The more we dig into this, you'll realize they're very different. So just keep that in mind. Cool. And now we have to get into something that I don't really like talking about, but we have to. And it is the functional versus class-based or object-oriented programming. So notice out of the box, when I started this project, this app.js, which I said is the entry, everything is run from here. It is using a function. It's not this class, style JavaScript that I showed you before. We're not setting it as a class and then invoking it as such. You can do both in React. And as it kind of talks about here, you can read into it. It started out as all classes, and then JavaScript/React developers said, actually, let's use functional because we have a few more tools we can get out of that. Platoon can't well, they could, and I think maybe they should, but they don't, because it does make you a little bit more marketable. We teach you how to do it in class-based, and we teach you how to do it in functional-based. Reason being, if a React app has existed before 2019, it's probably in class. If it's been built after 2019, it's probably in functional. You need to know how to do both. Is it hard to switch between the two? Not at all. But it gets a little confusing when you're trying to learn React, and there's two different ways. So bear with me on that. There's not a great way to teach you this without having both. I kind of wish we would teach you all one way, and at the end of the class tell you how to switch it, but we're going to do them together at the same time, as if you were learning JavaScript and Python at the same time. But did I cover all this? I think I did. Okay, we're going to create a React application called Cookie Clicker, or similar to Cookie Clicker. If you don't know what Cookie Clicker is, it's a super popular website here where you click on a cookie or something, and it counts the number of clicks, and it's extremely popular. It's not very hard. This is the whole game. It tells you your clicks per second and has high scores and such. Don't do this during class. I'll yell at you. We're gonna do something similar. We are just going to have buttons that keep track of the number of times you click them. Very simple. Okay. But first, we're going to throw the mess at you and convert this from functional to to class. Looking at them side by side, you can kind of see what changes we're going to need to be seeing here. So we are still going to be importing. Oh, am I in the right spot? Yeah, we're in app.js. These things are staying. We're going to import React from React. This is required when going from class so that we can use this React.component bit here. So we will be needing to take in a new import. And this is going to change things up a little bit. So instead of just function app, we're going to need to say class app extends React.component, pulling from the component library. All right. Instead of just returning, we're going to need to invoke render. Render is going to wrap everything up that's already here. I think that's it. We tab those to the side. What are we doing here? Okay. So all of this is going to be wrapped within render. Open that curly brace. Close it around here. Indent properly. And then at the bottom, I think it's all the same. All right. So let's see if I broke it. Rather than just copy paste, I want to show you what actually changed. That's all it is. So don't freak out if you see something in class and your instructions are in functional. The only thing that changes between the two is you need to bring in React. It is invoked like this rather than just setting a function. And then everything else needs to be wrapped up within this render invocation here. That's the difference. There's more to it that we'll get into, but that's the big, quick, easy way to quickly change this from class to functional. React component is a class provided by main React page. Yep, said that. Some people choose to import component explicitly. You could do this. I actually kind of prefer this because this is how we're going to invoke. So we're going to pull things out lately or later. We talk about yes, it is. But choose how you want to do it. Follow this lecture as you start your applications up, of course. So we're going to get the boilerplate, easy peasy, and put in some new stuff. Is it just going to pull away something I just plugged in there? Sure it is. Okay. All of this is now, we've got a div with a class name of app, h1. I've been clicked, and we got a button, click me. Let's see what it looks like. Easy peasy. Doesn't do anything as you would expect, is literally just a button that says click me. But we're going to show you how React kind of would accomplish this. You might be thinking in your head how you do it in Django, how you use Jinja to accomplish this. I'm going to show you why, one of the many reasons React is cool, because we can make stuff like this very simple. We've got X as a placeholder. We want to replace that with something that actually changes. Here's the other big meat and potatoes of today's lecture, and this is called state. So let's put state in here. Outside of the render, again, I said you got to put everything within the render. What I should have said is everything that is being returned to the virtual DOM is within render. Anything outside of render is not being displayed. So imagine if your HTML was all right here, but you could put a bunch of Python code on top. So you know your views in Python. You could take all that and we can slap it out here above all of this code directly in it, because this is not an HTML file. This is a JavaScript file. We can use JavaScript in this file. The only place where the HTML exists is within this render. Everything else is raw JavaScript. So again, we're not templating into HTML at this point. Technically, we never are. We are doing JavaScript things and we're spitting out some HTML for someone to use. State, I'm going to use the explanation they have because I feel like I'm going to say it incorrectly. I don't know if my example is the best. Actually, they don't really explain it the way I want to explain it. Think of state. Oh, I know it's here. I read through this all very quickly, and now I gotta remember what it says. That's kind of the best way to do that. State is a global JavaScript object, and one of the things you can do with it is force page changes when it's changed, right? So remember, if you make changes with Django, you kind of need, or sorry, you make changes to a page, you have to direct to the new page, or you have to refresh that page to see those changes. We're not doing that. We can change this data real time immediately on the displayed page, if that makes sense. Because this page is not an actual HTML template page getting served. It's JavaScript just creating a virtual HTML page. So we can interact with it however we want, and JavaScript will just kind of update everything that needs to get updated. So the other bit that is big for today. Remember in Jinja, this would look something, I think it's covered down here. If you wanted to inject your Python into your HTML, you would do Jinja like this. If you needed to do some Python coding, any kind of logical, something that's doing Python but not necessarily being displayed, it would look like this. In Jinja, it's two brackets, and this is what gets displayed. Oh, with one, I'm sorry. See, it's inviting me to go back and forth. So what is this? This is, because we're working in classes, remember, this class, this, like self, dot state. So this class dot state being the global JavaScript object we're working on, dot count. So it's going to display whatever is the app.state.class. So it should show 0. And I'll prove it to you. It does say 0 now. It doesn't say X anymore. Still not doing any, work, but that's okay. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about how things are being put to this page. Now we're actually going to do something with JavaScript. So as I mentioned, this is a JavaScript file. We can do JavaScript outside of the render because we don't want to be showing this to the people. Don't show them how the sausage is made. Do it up here. We're going to do a function, fat arrow function, called handle button click. This is not a fancy React thing. This is whatever the heck I want to call it. It is a made up function but this is good convention. Call it handle button click to handle when a button is clicked, right? That makes sense. This is another thing that you're going to learn about a lot today, because one of your assignments covers this quite a bit. You do not do something like what you might think is to do this. Leave that set state outside. Hey, just iterate that counter and display it. That would work. You don't do that. You don't mutate state directly. You utilize set state, because set state has some stuff that kind of comes with it. It tells the DOM to update. It triggers other hooks that are looking for state changes. If this data exists anywhere else on other pages, it's going to potentially, if you hook it up correctly, call out to those and say, hey, state changed over here. All of my children that are using state, y'all need to update. If you interact with state directly, it's not going to fire off those calls, because, you know, I could have, we'll kind of get into it a little bit. Don't let me forget about set state, but because it's going to make more sense at the end of this lecture. But if there's any children components plugged into this, they need to know that set or state was changed. And they're not going to know unless you do something to go update it. If you just have a single you know, object in here and make updates to it, it will change the value for these other components, but it's not going to trigger them to show the new value. The reason this is going to display and re-update quickly and show on the page is because we're changing state. You can get in some weird bits where it looks like it's working, but if you're not changing state, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Oh, did we fix this yet? Oh, I didn't call it. That's what I get for not updating. So instead of just click me, we're adding this in here. So button on click, this is important. So when this button is clicked, this is a React thing. You set it to this.handle button click. So whenever something actions this button, it's going to run this function. When this function is run, it's going to utilize set state to update this counter by 1, because we have plugged in this function directly into this button within our virtual DOM. So now we'll see if it updates. Yeah, I think it should, unless I broke it. There we go. I click a button. The on click triggers this function here, because I tell it, hey, when the button is clicked, this app dot handle button click dot handle button click, run it. It doesn't need any arguments. Change state. This is going to update because set state is going to poke this counter right here, and everything that's using that counter is going to get a trigger to say, hey, I was changed. Hey, I was changed. Hey, I was changed. Right now, it's just this one here, but we're going to do more than that. Okay, so another big concept, but kind of why React is popular, why what I'm talking about, because I keep saying components, I think, and I haven't showed you what components are. We can pull a lot of this logic out, and not just the logic, but the button itself, stash it in a components folder and say, hey, you want a button that does something when it's clicked? I got you, homie. It's in this components folder called the clicky button, or whatever you want to call it. And you can plug that in all over your application. It's like a custom HTML tag, which someone's probably going to yell at me and say, that's not right, Jordan. But that's how I kind of think about it. You've got these H1 tags here. You know what they do. You've got a button tag. You know what that does. We're going to create our own that does what we tell it to. We're going to build components that we can plug into our virtual DOM that generate some HTML. So let's show you how that's done. Within source, I'm going to create a folder, because we don't get this automatically with React. There are tools that give you a lot of this automatically, but we're using pretty vanilla React here. Let's call it components. I can call it whatever I want. This is JavaScript. React is not as configuration heavy as Django. It doesn't care that much about its rules. You could change all kinds of stuff and not break it. Django is going to tell you, heck no, don't touch my stuff. React, we got to be more we got to follow convention more because it's not going to do stuff for us. It's not going to say, oh, templates, I know what templates are, give me those. We're going to have to say, go get your template, it's here. I named it this and I put it there. So React doesn't know, oh, those components, I know where my components are. Yeah, I have no problem. We need to tell React, hey, I put it in the components folder, by the way, and that's the components folder. I know I'm moving a little slow explaining these things, but I think it's very important to know what is required and what is not required and how things work. Why does everything hate me? Okay, so within components, you could just stash this component in here, but we're going to be clean about this. We're going to call it, see, there it goes again. Why does it jump? Does anyone know what's happening to me? I create a folder and then I need to click in here or else it jumps to the page. Button component. So within components, button component, we're going to do a file and we're going to call it button component.js. Notice, if you will, I named these the exact same thing. You don't have to, but you should. Don't shoot yourself in the foot by trying to break the mold. It's going to be a lot easier if you do React things the React way, just like Django, except Django will break and React will let you shoot yourself in the foot. So, this is what we're going to do. You see, there's a lot of content in here, but notice most of the content we've plugged into app.js is for this button. App.js does not want that kind of stuff. App.js is your main entry point in your application. You could have a 7,000 line long app.js. Don't do it. It needs to be very concise on what it's doing, so it's easier to drill down through your application. So app.js does not need to handle this handle button click. It's a silly thing to plug in there. We're going to create it in this button component.js, and look just how much is going over here. The state of buttons is going to be plugged into here. So this component here, this counter state of buttons, this counter state is going to be associated with this component. The handle button click is going to be there. The important thing I want to point out is this H1 tag, this button on click, it's also going to be in here. Every time we pull this component in, it's going to have all of this stuff in the component. Look what our app.js looks like now. I'm going to paste over what we don't need. We've pulled out all of the button logic because we don't need it. This is app.js. This is the entry point into our app. You want a button component, you call button component right here. That comes from import button component, which is the name. These do need to match. It's going to go look for that class. It better be called button component in Haskell case. Haskell case meaning first letter is capitalized, every other letter is capitalized, no spaces, no underscores. This is JavaScript. This is how we do it. So button component from components, we named that, we created that. Button component, we created that folder also. Button component.js, that's the actual component. When we render it, give me that HTML looking tag that I call button component. Everything that exists in this button component.js is now going to display like this. Let's verify I didn't break nothing. Looks the same to me. All right, Jordan, that's cool. That's concise. That's kind of dry, I guess. But I don't know what you're talking about with these components. Look at that. Every time I plug in button component, it's going to be pulling in that whole component, and they're not shared. This is a single component. It has its own state. That's why I'm clicking one, and it's not changing the rest. I'm clicking this one, it's not changing the rest. Each one of these is a new instance of that button component. Have I lost anyone? Please speak up now.
This may be a random or more advanced question, but you had kind of mentioned how you could I guess do this state thing across the app and keep track of the count for other stuff. So is that a different way to use the component than we're doing now, obviously?
Yeah. So what if we're getting a little ahead, but what if button component had a component within it? What if I create a new component called heck, I don't know, you just wanted some undertext for the component that says, hey, I'm component number whatever for this button. We would within this component do something like this, like new component. When I set state here, this now affects all of its children components, but nothing above it. Everything below it can see state, nothing above it. And we're going to see how you pass these things down to its children. That actually wouldn't work. I would need to say something like, I really got to remember how to do this. It'd be props like state dot count is equal to, or sorry, I forget how to do it. I'm not going to show you right now because I need to verify that I know how to do this. But you would pass that state along to all of its children, and its children would know when that's updated. So if there was a child that belonged to the button component, you wouldn't change anything here. Still this button component. When we go there, it's going to have children that are dependent upon its state that now exists, within it. And each of those children would not know anything about these other button components. They would only know about their parent. And it's important to keep these all separated. And there's a lot of good ways to do that because you're looking at this like, well, how the heck am I supposed to know which button I'm clicking? We can pass along keys to backtrack, and we can iterate through these with names, which you'll see. Does that answer the question at all, or did that make it worse?
Yes, no, that was very helpful and good foresight.
Okay, cool. I'm always scared because I'm not great at React, but we're all learning together, y'all. All right, we have a ton of buttons. Not very programmatic. Yeah, this is fine. I'll show you how to do this. This is JavaScript. You can do anything JavaScript you want in JavaScript. Within our app.js, by the way, this is looking like a lot of stuff to put in app.js. We could probably turn this into a component if we wanted. Call it the create button component and do this somewhere else. But let's not get too far ahead. We're going to make a function called create buttons. When you invoke it, it's going to iterate through 100 or 0 to 100. And for every time you do that, it's going to push a button into this button component. And then you're just going to return buttons. If you return a list, it's going to just spit it out as if it were a list. This is not really necessary, but again, we're running this.create buttons. Not within a tag, or sorry, this is within a tag. This is within the div tag. The content of it is just this.create buttons. So it's not going to spit the function out because we're invoking it. If you did this, if you took this away, that'd be a real problem because it doesn't return anything that this can use. You need to invoke it. I said that wrong. You need to invoke your functions if you want them to run. Did I leave something out somewhere, Jordan? Yeah, sure. Did I? What's going on? You still upset with me? Uh-oh. All right, what did I do? Parsing index, missing semicolon, line 19. No, we're in index.js. I think I didn't copy the whole thing, or there's an issue here. Try this again. Oh. Yeah, I didn't copy the whole thing. It lopped it off like right here. Okay, let's see. How many buttons we got? Well, I'm not going to count them, but I'm going to bet you it's about 100 buttons right there. Each of them unique to themselves. Seems like a weird thing to do, but we're just showing you kind of the ways to do that. What is it pointing out here? This is kind of important. Yeah, I want to show you this. Because I talked about earlier, hey, how am I going to keep all these together? Look at this. We got a warning on our page. Each child in the list should have a unique key prop. What that's saying is, hey, I don't know how to keep these components unique. All I know is I ran them in a list. Now you can go through and iterate some other value and guess where it's supposed to be. But React really would like to know, hey, I'm unique. What's my key? What's my name? Just like you would add a primary key. This is a bad example, but get you thinking this way. If you just as you put primary keys in your models in SQL, they need that primary key just so they can say, hey, this is me. This is my unique identifier. You want to pass something down. This is my name. Everything else could be iterated over, could be changed. This is a constant primary key for me. The way you would do that is instead of just button.pushing, look, we are pushing in, maybe I didn't explain this as well as I maybe should have. So again, let me go over this again. This button's array, buttons.push, this is just like append in Python, if y'all forgotten your JavaScript. We're appending a whole full-blown component, which we pulled in, but we're also giving it arguments. That's right. This can take positional arguments when you invoke it. What we're doing here is just saying, hey, key, this is a React thing. React does know what keys are. It knows that components have keys. Your key is the index. What does that do? Basically, every button now has its own key, and it's not going to complain, hopefully, about not having a key. Doesn't look like it does. No more red, because each of these buttons, can I show you this? Is Jordan good enough to show you this? Look at one of these here. I don't know if it displays to the DOM. I don't think it displays to the DOM. We would have to look that up by the component. But rest assured, these components each have their own primary key because we said, hey, here's your key. You're going to see that error a lot because this is not a thing you have to do to make things work. Sometimes you don't want to do that. But it is good convention to make sure things have keys. The more React you do, the more important you realize this is. Not always for your solution, but it's a good habit to get into. That is it for entry to React. All brand new stuff, nothing like Django. Back in JavaScript, gotta dust off the JavaScript rust. No pun intended. Questions now about anything we've done start to finish.
So a question about the state. You click the button, right? It starts at 0 because we set this counter at 0.
Yes.
And you click away. And then what happens when you refresh? Then does it go back to the original state? Or
good question, because I forgot to do that. That is a good question. Let's do this top one so we can find it when we're done. Top button. I'm clicking it. Command Shift R goes back to 0. State is not a value that's going to be maintained upon a refresh. We're not writing to the application. This exists in this file when this file is run. When this file is rerun, and the reason it would rerun is if you invoke the render, it's going to destroy all that. So state only exists on the page it's on. If you want it to go somewhere else, we'll have to do that a different way. But state, yes, good question. I should have brought that up. State exists in the now. You refresh this page, state's gone.
probably why the cookie clicker works, the game then.
That's right. Yeah, it blows away when they refresh it. That's exactly what's going on. Yeah, good question. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that. That's very important. Any other questions about knowledge holes I try to give y'all? Run through this lecture one time before starting an assignment. Make sure everything works. Make sure your React works the way it's supposed to before you start fighting installation issues. If you do have installation issues or something going on, React's not working as intended, definitely let me know. I can get you fixed up straight. if there's no questions, I'm gonna stop recording when I find it. Where'd I put that? There we go.